Hello there everyone. If you're watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. As you can see, I'm not wearing my headphones today. I'm not going to be watching or responding to any video footage in this video, so as a test, I'm going to try filming without the headphones on just to see how it goes. So with that being said, let's get into the subject matter of today's video, which is how 43% of Christian evangelicals do not believe that Jesus is God. Now you may be wondering to yourself, where am I getting this claim from and where am I getting that percentage from? Well, I'm getting it from a Christianity Today article, which you can see right here on screen, which is titled Top 5 Heresies Among American Evangelicals. And I don't know why it keeps zooming down right there, but the subtitle says it's 2022, but Arianism and Pelagianism are steadily making a comeback according to the State of Theology report. This article was put out in September of 2022, which means that this article and this information came out about a year and a half ago, which a year and a half ago is still fairly recent. I mean, the percentages you're hearing about in this article regarding the various things it talks about are probably still accurate today. That being said, though, there's a lot of things in this article that are worth responding to, and I'm probably going to make a whole video series out of responding to this article. But we're going to go to heresy number 3 that a lot of American evangelicals are embracing, which is Jesus is not God. The article says, given the above beliefs on Jesus as a created being, it's not too surprising that 43% affirmed that Jesus was a great teacher, but he was not God, which is another form of Arian heresy. This effectively denies the divinity of Christ and his unity with God the Father as an equal member in the Trinity, who is one God in 3 persons. This has been considered classic Orthodox belief since the early church and is based on many biblical passages, like where Jesus says, I and the Father are one, John 10:30. For this, he gets accused of blasphemy and threatened with stoning by religious leaders for claiming to be God. And then they show a chart here of the people who think that Jesus was just a teacher, but he was not God. In 2018, the number of evangelicals who believed this claim was 30%. In 2020, the percentage was the same, 30%. But from 2020 to 2022, the percentage jumped from 30 to 43%, a major jump. Holy smokes. And to give you even more background information behind the percentage, I have here the State of Theology report itself, and the particular graph that you are looking at shows you the amount of U.S. adult respondents that there were, and then the filtered respondents is at 711. And the filtered respondents is filtered by whether or not they're evangelical Christians. So that means out of the 3,011 U.S. adults who responded to this survey, this study, whatever you want to call it, 711 of those 3,011 respondents are evangelical Christians. And then when you take your mouse and you highlight the various portions, you see that 5% somewhat agree and 38% strongly agree that Jesus was a great teacher, but he was not God. So, in other words, if the 3,011 U.S. adult respondents is a representative sample, then this means that roughly 23.5% of the U.S. population identifies as evangelical Christians, specifically. And within that 23.6%, 43% agree with, either strongly or somewhat, the claim that Jesus was merely a great teacher, but he was not God. Now, you can question whether or not the sample size of this survey/study was big enough to trust the results of it and be able to apply it as a general statement across the United States of America's population in regards to evangelical Christians and their beliefs. But if all the Christians that were sampled in this study were Bible-believing Christians, you would expect the percentage of people who believe that Jesus was not God among evangelical Christians to be at 0%. You would expect every one of them to affirm that Jesus is God. Why? Because when you study the scriptures, and especially the Gospels, you figure out really quickly that Jesus himself claimed to be God, which is contrary to what 43% of Christian evangelicals in the U.S. believe. Now, there's a lot of passages we could get into in just the Gospels where Jesus claimed to be God either directly or indirectly, but we're going to look at 3 passages in particular that I think will get the point across. In John chapter 2, verses 23 through 25, we read, "Now while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, many people saw the signs he was performing and believed in his name. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. He did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person." Now, when you study the Old Testament, you know that God knows what's in each person because he can see our hearts, and he knows each and every thought and secret and inclination of the human heart. So in order for Jesus to be able to look into people and know what's in each person, he has to be God to do that. But let's look at another example. Matthew 21, 14 through 17 says, "The blind and the lame came to him at the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the teachers of the law saw the wonderful things he did, and the children shouting in the temple courts, 'Hosanna to the Son of David,' they were indignant. 'Do you hear what these children are saying?' they asked him. 'Yes,' replied Jesus. 'Have you never read, from the lips of children and infants you, Lord, have called forth your praise?' And he left them and went out of the city to Bethany, where he spent the night." Now, this passage in particular is fascinating because the children worshiping Jesus are worshiping him as if he's God. And the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the teachers of the law, and the chief priests, they go to Jesus and ask him if he understands what these children are doing, basically implying to Jesus that he should tell the children to stop worshiping him. And then what does Jesus do? He makes a quotation from Psalms 8, where children are worshiping God. And Jesus literally quotes a psalm where children are worshiping and praising God to justify allowing children to praise and worship himself. In other words, Jesus was indirectly proclaiming himself to be God. But thankfully, there was one time where Jesus explicitly called himself God in a way that is unmistakable. In John 8, 57 through 59, it says, "You are not yet 50 years old, they said to him, and you have seen Abraham." "Very truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "before Abraham was born, I am." At this they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. So in John 8:58, Jesus literally calls himself I am, which if you're familiar with Exodus chapter 3, I think it's verses 13 through 14, I am is the name that God calls himself. Abraham asks him, well, when I go to my people and they ask who sent me, who should I tell them sent me? And God's response was to tell Abraham, say to the people, I am has sent me to you. In other words, I am is God's name. I am is the English translation of the word Yahweh. So, when Jesus calls himself I am in John 8:58, he is claiming to be the same uncreated eternal God who spoke with Moses at the burning bush incident in Exodus chapter 3. And that's why they picked up stones to stone him, because they refused to accept his claim to be Yahweh. Just by looking at these 3 verses, it becomes crystal clear and unmistakable that Jesus was not just a human teacher who was not God. Jesus proclaimed himself to be Yahweh. He did so explicitly in John 8:58, and he did so indirectly and implicitly in many, many other ways throughout the Gospels. And then, of course, you get into the rest of the New Testament, and there's other proclamations of Jesus' deity made by the other New Testament authors. And, of course, there's the Old Testament, which prophesies about Jesus. Now, you may be wondering to yourself, how come we saw a 13% increase in the number of Christian evangelicals who believe that Jesus is not God from 2020 to 2022? How come in 2018 through 2020 we didn't see any difference at all, but in 2020 through 2022 we saw the 13% increase? Well, I think I can answer that. What happened during 2020 through 2022? Gee, I wonder what happened. Oh, that's right. We had the magic virus, and we had all the lockdowns and the masks, and we had the magic jabs, and all of that stuff that lasted for a couple of years, which resulted in a lot of people staying indoors and not getting out in the community a lot more than they were used to, which forced them to go on the internet to get information. And I think as a result, a lot of so-called Christian evangelicals were exposed to a lot more heresies and heretics and religion skeptics and atheists than they previously were. And I think a lot of them no longer believe that Jesus is God because of stuff like that. But then again, there is a bigger problem within Christianity in the United States of America that is very persistent and has been going on much longer than this problem has. The problem is that most so-called Christians are biblically ignorant. They don't actually know what the Bible says and teaches, and they also don't know the evidence in the various fields of knowledge that support the various claims made by the Bible. And so, because they're ignorant about what the Bible says, and because they're ignorant about Christian apologetics, they are ripe for the picking when it comes to deconversion and or accepting heresies. We are done at this point in the video with this article from Christianity Today, but make no mistake, there will be at least 1, probably 2 or 3 more videos responding to the various heresies in this article in the future. But for now, I will leave you at this. As you can see, 43% of so-called evangelical Christians in the USA do not believe that Jesus is God. And that is something that we have to correct by educating Christians on what the Bible says about Jesus' deity, and more specifically, educating them about what Jesus himself claimed about himself, which is that he is Yahweh. But before we leave this video, I'd like to talk to you about YouTube censorship, which is a thing that's been going on for almost a decade and is only getting worse over time. And with all the YouTube alternatives that have sprung up in the last 7 years, I want to bring to your attention 2 different YouTube alternatives that TTOR is on, where if you are a fan of TTOR content, I would encourage you to subscribe to me on and check out my content there. First one is Rumble, which is a YouTube alternative that is owned by Donald Trump's media company. Hundreds of millions of people visit the site every month. It has millions upon millions upon millions of users. You have a lot of big channels, and even people like me who are starting from scratch on Rumble, we're able to build up our own audience here, as I have over 100 subscribers at this point, and I get really good view counts on a lot of my videos relative to my subscriber count. So if you're a fan of my content and you want to follow me on a site where freedom of speech is a real thing and I can talk about things that would get me banned from YouTube, and you want to see my live streams where I do live shows for God TV Radio and the TTOR show, well, I would encourage you to subscribe to my Rumble channel, check out my Rumble videos, and tune in to my live streams on Rumble. The other YouTube alternative I'd like to bring to your attention is called Quarter, which is actually my very own YouTube alternative that I started in May of 2022, and I'm the one who moderates the site as well as promotes it. I'm basically a one-man show in that regard. But Quarter is very feature-rich and functional. You got HD video upload capacity, including 4K. You have public playlists. You have an easy-to-use comment moderation system. You technically can live stream and restream to any site on the internet, but I have some technical issues to work out with that. And you also have features that you don't get on YouTube, such as the ability to upload pictures instead of videos. You can upload audio clips instead of videos. You can write articles, which are like YouTube's community posts, but way more robust, including the ability to embed pictures and videos from any video sharing site on the planet onto your articles on Quarter. You also have live video chat rooms, which are similar to Google Hangouts, except it's an open source alternative to Google Hangouts, and you can also live stream to your channel from these rooms. And you also have Quarter Bucks, which is an insight currency / point system that you earn by getting views on your uploads, and in turn, once you have enough Quarter Bucks, you can promote your Quarter channel or individual videos on the front page of the site. So now that you know about my Rumble and Quarter channels, I bid you adieu and farewell, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.